Welcome back to the Pursuit of Property podcast, guys. Today, it's just me and Cade, and we're going to have a conversation about unexpected maintenance and repairs.
Something that, especially recently, we've come across a lot and have a lot of experience with, so to speak. So, oh my gosh, we've got a lot of personal stories for you guys, a lot of personal experience that we've gone through. So shoot, let's jump right in.
Well, so a lot of people, when they talk about getting into rentals, a lot of the time their biggest concern is, what if my tenant doesn't pay? What if I have these big repairs? We obviously had talked about a lot of that stuff before we bought our properties, but let's just have a conversation then about what those conversations looked like and everything ahead of time.
So, and starting out too, everybody's like, and I know we were a little bit guilty of it in the beginning too, and everybody's like, I want to own rental properties. Let's own rental properties. It's passive income. My tenant's paying my rent and I'm going to cash flow and this, that, and the other. And you kind of get blindsided by kind of what you hear from other people or what you see online or on the flipping shows or HGTV and all the gurus. And it's like, yes, rental properties are a great way to get passive income, but what a lot of people don't talk about is exactly what we're talking about: the unexpected repairs, maintenance, money that it costs, headaches and stuff like that. So backtracking to when we were first talking about doing our partnership and buying our first couple rentals, I think what you said was important. Was the first thing we had talked about was what our mindset had to be going in, and kind of, maybe not a slap in the face, because we kind of knew what the experience was, but just kind of getting on the same page of each other and also going in realistically knowing what we were walking into.
Yeah, we didn't walk obviously into this thinking it's just going to be like, some profit machine that just pumps out cash every month. And that was really key. It was good because if we had thought about that, our first year would not have been very pleasant. And so obviously, we're buying these properties just to be long-term investments, and we're putting the money forward now, knowing it's going to pay dividends in the future. So that was really key. A lot of the times people talk about this pumps out all this cash flow, and they forget to talk about they didn't budget anything for repairs or maintenance. And if we had done that, and we had planned our purchases off that, I legitimately think we would have had to sell by now.
Yeah, I think we would have been screwed.
We would have been toast.
So one thing that we had written down right here that I think is really important is, to an extent, we wrote down that repairs are investments into your property.
Yes.
And understanding that, differentiating between investing in your property and then also thinking of it as an expense.
Yeah.
Right? So let's talk
mix
about that a little more. Yeah.
Well, okay. And let's break it down. There's different kinds of repairs. The repairs that we would consider investments into our property would be fixing up large things like roofs, plumbing. These are things that you're going to have to do at some point. So why not get it done now before the cash out refinance and then finance it over a longer period of time?
Yeah. And knowing that if you have to fix a roof or plumbing or electrical, if you don't fix those things, your house is going to be in a whole lot worse shape than if you don't fix them. And
exactly.
Soon you'll find yourself without a tenant, without any rent, and a house that needs a whole bunch of extra stuff done and more money poured in because you didn't fix those integral things up front.
And it's funny because we seem to have done a lot of those repairs. Part of buying all the properties that we did without, going through a traditional purchase route, it's we don't know about the sewer line and all that. So even this last weekend, we had the sewer line break on a property and it flooded.
Yeah.
Thank the Lord we had a good property manager who was able to get it done quickly and for a pretty decent price.
Yeah. Good contractor.
But guess what? Now we don't have to worry about that house having that problem again.
Yeah.
For the time that we will own that plumbing will be good.
Yeah. And that kind of leads into another thing that you and I had talked about, which was basically having that expectation up front and knowing that these are the things you encounter when you sign up to be a landlord.
Yes.
We're not signing up. solely and just expecting a check in the mailbox, right? You've got to expect going in that you're going to have issues with tenants. You're going to have repairs that pop up. You're going to have emergency, unexpected repairs that pop up. And it's going into that fully knowing that. So when those things do happen, you're not as stressed, you're not as worried or caught off guard because you know that these things do pop up just like they happen with your primary residence, right?
Exactly.
Or if you own a home. Or
your business, if you own a business.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny too that you even brought that up. Like there's two different things that come when you have these unexpected repairs and maintenance. It's like the financial burden and then the like stress, like the physical burden of like the panic that I think you and I have both experienced when you get an invoice for that kind of an amount. And so like just even looking at that, there's like different things that you have to do to make sure you're prepared. And over the last year, we've had our run-ins. We had a $20,000 invoice come in. And we weren't expecting it. Not to say that we didn't know it was going to come at some point, but it just dropped in our email one day nonchalantly. And it's hilarious because like now we understand why we were so panicked. We hadn't gone through these things and like figured it out.
Yeah. Side note on that story, that was our first big invoice from our contractor / property management. And we knew we were going to have to owe a little bit of money for some of the work we were doing. I don't think either of us was expecting $20,000.
I think we were expecting 10.
Yeah. And so I remember I may have been on my way home from the office at that point, and I think you were the same or
I was out with a friend.
Yeah. And I remember us hopping on the phone and us being literally like, and excuse my French, holy shit, what the hell is this? What are we gonna do? And I remember we're meeting at the office in 30 minutes. See you soon. And then we go and we're literally there backtracking our invoices and adding numbers here to see what possibly we had missed and if there was a lesson to be learned for us.
That was important
too. And that there could be a whole nother podcast episode on that and just being up to date and aware of where you are at financially and what you're doing that way. But I think that was a really good lesson for us, both with the mindset wise you were talking about moving forward when, we just got hit with a $17,000 invoice. And it's like at that point, neither one of us had the panic attack. I mean, we worked through it pretty easily. We knew our game plan and that's how that shift happened, which I think is important for us.
Yeah. And we also got double downed on. That's when we found out that the sewer broke that weekend. And so,
so we're almost up at the 20K.
We were at the 20K range and it was very different how you and I reacted compared to the first time. And I think a big part of that was mentorship. So first off, our property manager is somebody we've known for a while. And we were able to have an honest conversation like, hey, we weren't really like expecting this all at once. What do? We think we made a mistake. How do we solve this? We got right into the problem solving. We were able to figure out that solution. But the other big part is we went to mentors and we said, like, what would you do in this situation? And it was hilarious hearing the responses. I mean, there was anything from like, well, man up and pay it. Like, this is you want to be a big boy. This is how you be a big boy.
Yep.
To like, actual like financial advice. Like, hey, here's what you could do to like solve this problem and set this up and then deduct from here. It was just very interesting having somebody like that looking over your shoulder.
Yeah. And I think talking the concept of talking to other people or going in a mentor kind of leads into kind of how this whole thing started, which I know we wanted to talk about too, was tackling these unexpected repairs and maintenance and even just owning rental properties with two people, with a business partner, is night and day difference if you own them by yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're owning them by yourself, you're the only one making decisions. You're only worrying about yourself. You're all caught up to speed on, where you are at mentally, financially, and all this stuff. But it turns completely upside down when you decide to jump into business with a friend and, become business partners and now go and own 8 rentals, however many miles away. Right.
Well, and so the other part to that too is like, we're only in this 18 months, but like legitimately we are still really good friends.
Yeah.
Like we've had moments where we disagreed already, and like being able to be on top of that relationship and all of that that's been a key part in us still being friends and having investments that we enjoy.
Oh, 100%. And I know people who have asked and people who have come to us and said, oh, yeah, me and my buddy, we're also talking about going and buying rental properties. And I think it's the biggest thing we have under here. I know we were talking about, which we have told people over and over and over again before making that choice just to jump into business with a friend who also wants to do this, that in real estate, is to read the specific book. So what's that book?
It's Rocketfuel.
Rocketfuel. So let's dive into that just a little bit.
The big part about before we got into this is we had a lot of people warn us about partnerships, right? And that's good because we learned a lot. I really don't think we would have done as well had we not learned about this. Mm-hmm. But before we even bought our first property, we already understood what each person's ideas were, financial status and relationship status and everything from personal to business. And like we've been able to maintain that by following the precepts of the book, and it gives you very easy to follow rules. And we've just implemented the rules in our day-to-day life. Most importantly being like the level 10 meeting, right?
So, and let's talk about the level 10 meeting. So every week, Scott and I, we set aside at a minimum an hour, sometimes at,
like
between 90 minutes to 2 hours, at least once a week. And we're both sitting down. If we have any of these kind of invoices pop up or any emails from property management with some unexpected repairs or maintenance or really anything, it's a time for us to sit down and really just check in on each other personally, professionally, both with our partnership, both in our individual businesses, and just make sure we're still, a well-oiled machine still running and everything's running smoothly.
And more importantly, finding where the chinks in our armor are.
Yeah.
Especially, we've both had our own problems. Like, I know I personally have struggled with like finance management and understanding like, okay, here's how I track everything. And you've been very helpful in like understanding, okay, this is where I've been struggling. Here's where I'm going to take over in our business and really like lead the team here and solve these problems, which has been a night and day benefit for me because I don't even know what bills got paid this month. I don't check our account balances or anything like that. And that's because we've had these level 10 meetings where you've been able to understand that's my problem.
Yeah.
And, on your side, maybe it's, other things where I'm taking over conversations with private money or with attorneys or escrow, whatever I can do, that's where I take over. And I think we found a pretty good balance where we both feel like the other person is really carrying their weight, if not more.
Yeah. And I think that relationship is 100% what kind of reaffirmed us when we were talking about getting into business from Rocketfuel, right? And not to dive too deep into the book, but Rocketfuel really helped us kind of outline what kind of two different people there are in business. And when you're trying to go into a partnership or you're in a company, kind of the dynamics like that. And I think reading that, we saw that one person's strengths were the other's weakness and the other person's strengths were the other weakness, and bringing those two kind of opposite people together in a sense really helped the partnership flourish and why we still are doing the way we are now.
And how it plays back into like all these maintenance and repairs too is that like I'm definitely more of the emotional, like jump straight to a conclusion. Here's what we're going to do. Try to like make a decision, whereas you've been always more like, let's count it out. Let's see what we can do here. It's been nice because in the moments where we've been uncertain, I've been able to push us through. And like when we bought these houses, we were a little concerned. And like, I'm not saying I led the way in that, but to say that like, I definitely was like, oh, let's just do it. Like, let's just get it over with.
Yes, 100%.
And in these repairs, you've been much more diligent in following through and making sure like, okay, this invoice did get paid and this work did get done. And figuring out how that's, all works. That's been very crucial, especially with, maintaining these properties over a year and a half and the amount of projects that we've done.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that. This isn't necessarily a repair, but it was an unexpected expense that just popped up with owning these properties, which was for our insurance. And we get hit with two pretty hefty invoices for our insurance. And, we're waiting. Obviously, we don't pay them right away. I'm like, okay, we were never
trying to figure out why.
Yeah. And then we get told why. And I'm like, okay, makes sense. Go and pay him. And then we later figure out, oh no, we just double paid. So it's like, it's good to be able to think those things through and not just be able to freaking just pay those off the bat and not ask any questions. Same exact thing if we have, a line item and an unexpected repair and be like, hey, I don't remember talking about this or approving this. Like, what is this $600? Exactly. So let's kind of segue into the different types of unexpected repairs, or not even maybe unexpected, but just repairs and maintenance in general, because there's a hierarchy and a level to it. Me and you aren't just going out and approving every single request. We'd be broke. Our business would be broke. So let's kind of go through that hierarchy and how we kind of approve or push out in requests or repairs and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we could definitely get more organized on this and have it like actually filtered and labeled and like be more fiscally just based off factual numbers versus emotions. But like we try to like write down how we've done it in the past. And like really the big thing is like what you're saying, there's just different tiers of prioritization. So number one would be, a flood, a fire, sewage line breaking, significant health and safety and emergency issues. With that, we've given permission to our property manager to make decisions for us. If something comes up and it needs to be acted on quick, decide. We have that relationship with our property manager that we trust that they're going to make the right decision that we would have made.
Which not only helps us in that, because there's a time difference and it's so far away and it takes a little bit of time for that communication and news to come through, is one, let's use this, these plumbing pipes and sewage breaking as an example, right? So not only does them taking that quick action and do that potentially save us money by not having more damages being done, or, water sitting in the basement or leaking more everywhere in the next 24 or 48 hours if they're waiting to get approval. It's also for the tenant, right? We want the tenant to be happy. We want them living in a pride of ownership house. We don't want them, that we're not slumlords. So it's like
our goal is to provide a nice living situation.
100%. So when property management is able to take that swift action, it's just a lot easier for the tenant. They're not without plumbing for an extra 2 days because they're waiting on approval from us or us to do something. Yeah. So it's just better that way for those emergency stuff. We've given that permission to property management to just take care of it.
And again, we've made that decision knowing that in an emergency situation, it's to protect our asset on top of perform on our contractual obligation, provide like suitable living situations.
Yes.
So that's a mindset thing that we didn't originally have. I think originally we were like, oh, when maintenance and repairs come up, we have some time to discuss.
Yeah.
There's going to be times where it's like, you have to get it done right now. So that's been good. And I think that came from understanding that, like, if you don't do that, the damage, the opportunity lost, or the opportunity cost is really significant.
Yeah. Which is directly linked to the question that me and you had asked each other was, will this repair stop rents from coming in or make the home unlivable?
Yes.
Right? So if this thing pops up, one, is it going to stop the money coming in? Because our cash flow number is the most important to our business.
Making sure that we are getting rent.
And will it make the home unlivable? Which kind of ties back into we don't want people living in an unlivable home, right?
Well, and that's like a second tier, right? So like emergency is something that needs to get acted on within like 5 seconds ago.
Yes.
This next unlivable question has to do with like plumbing leaks, roof leaks, doors missing, things like that. Like we've had the most random things pop up, and it's like, we don't make the decision. If I was living in that house, would I do it? Because most of the time we're going to do most of these repairs.
Of course.
But for a tenant and a landlord relationship, it's the conversation is like, are we performing obligations to provide suitable living? Mm-hmm. Like if your bathroom is leaking down into your kitchen, that is an immediate repair.
Yeah.
That needs to get solved.
Yeah.
But like if your, tub is dripping, like a little drip, like that's not right.
Not
understanding where our obligation is definitely been figuring out. It's taken some time.
Yeah, 100%. And the kind of third tier that we had talked about, which we have had experience of before, and I think we've got it either just wrapped up or the date is coming up soon, is code enforcement / government required maintenance, which really I mean, we can sit here and talk about it. We can try and negotiate with contractors to get the repair price down, but those are repairs that legally need to get done. Otherwise, we can get in a whole heap of trouble.
And we've seen it too, like with Fresno landlords. Like, this is something that we've targeted in the past for our deals. Code enforcement is part of being a landlord. Understanding that, like, your tenant's going to do stuff that's going to get you on code enforcement. A lot of the times it's trash. It's not cleaning up. It's things like that. Well, we get hit with the fine, and understanding that we have an obligation on some of the stuff to do it ourselves, such as the roof. We have a roof that we needed to repair on a garage.
Yep.
When we bought the home, we weren't planning on doing it, but, you know, here we are. You know, that's something that we pay for and handle, you know. But then also, like, we've had tenants that just trash the outside of the property with their own personal items, and we've sent requests to clean it up, and we get racked up with fines. And guess what? You know, those tenants are usually the ones who stop paying, and we end up having to evict and then go after them to repay that debt.
Yeah.
You know, but understanding, like, where that obligation is too has been interesting. That's something that you and I have been pretty quick on trying to decide. I mean, whenever we get a code enforcement email, it's fast, because we get it in the mail.
Yeah.
We send it to RPM, and then from there they're like, well, what do you want us to do? Like, by then we should have already made a decision on, like, you know, hey, get us a quote, get this done right away, or hey, get us a quote, we're going to schedule it to get done on this day, whatever.
And then subsequently let code enforcement / the county know that they are in fact done. They can come and reinspect it.
Yes,
so it's not late, anything like that, right?
Yeah. Or, hey, send this over to, you know, we've even made that decision. Like, hey, you know, please bill this to the tenant. You know?
Yeah.
Because,
like the clean out of the garbage or trash in front of
Chapin that did that?
It was either Chapin or O'Brien that had a bunch of trash in the alleyway or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you can't just be dumping all this stuff in the alley and then us be hitting with the bill. Find a place to put your trash. And that kind of leads into one of the final two tiers we have, which is not our problem / it's the tenant's responsibility, right? So it's not our responsibility to make sure the tenant gets their trash put away or make sure that they're upkeeping the property as if they should be, as if it was their own house.
Parking their car on the lawn.
Exactly, right?
You know,
so
there's a driveway.
So when we get hit with, you know, something like that where it's like, you know, $400 to clean up this trash and garbage, it's like, okay, we may front it so that it gets done, but we're going to take that to the tenant and be like, hey, look, you know, that this was X, this will be tacked on to your rent this month because of X, Y, and Z. What can we do to make sure this doesn't happen again, not only for you but for us too, because we don't want you know, to be keep being
we don't
on
want
code
it,
enforcement's radar and keep being hit with this stuff.
Yeah. And I think we kind of skipped the section that we sometimes have, which is like quality of life increases.
Yeah.
When we rented out one of our more recent properties, it didn't have window screens. Mm-hmm. And that tenant reached out and said, I want window screens. And we said, look, we understand. We want window screens in our own home. We get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
At the moment, we can't do that. And it's not even because we don't want to help those people. It's always come from a place of the numbers.
Yeah, it's not coming from a place of we're just being assholes.
Right, we're not being greedy about it. We're trying to recoup,
of course,
a $20,000 investment that we just made into fixing up this house. Like, we can't tack on an additional $800 before you've even paid, you know, a couple
2 months rent. Yeah, you know, making an investment into the tenant before we even know if. Obviously, we screen them and do this, that, and the other, but you don't know until the rent starts coming in.
And we've experienced that too, where the tenant moves in after we've screened them and we thought this is going to work out, and they immediately don't pay rent. And it's like, come on, dude. Like, we send you an eviction notice on your, you know, first 15 days in the home.
Yeah.
Like, that's why we don't do our big repairs for people right away. We do health and safety, code enforcement. Those are the two big things we have to make sure.
Yeah. And if the tenant wants to go ahead and put on window screens themselves for their own comfort and stuff, like, more than welcome to. Or if a tenant wants to change, you know, a light fixture and they want permission to throw in a fan instead, right? Like, we're not
going to get mad about that.
And we're not going to front to pay for the new fan because that's not.
It wasn't how
exactly. When you got there, there's light, everything functioning. You know what I mean?
Well, and I just want to say for the listeners, I don't want to interrupt you, but like, when we turn these properties, they're nice.
Yes,
like they're well done properties.
Yeah,
we don't have any properties that we've given to a new renter that we have felt at all embarrassed about.
No.
I mean, we ensure that everything is tip top. Not to say that it's like a flip, in Beverly Hills, but
No.
to say that like the flooring has been done, the paint is done, the kitchen is remodeled, the bathrooms are remodeled, leaks are sealed, windows are done. It's like we go through and we're putting good amount of money into these things.
Yes.
Like, the house is only worth $30,000 and we're putting 15 to 20 into this thing. Now it's worth, 70, but like we put almost the same price that we purchased the home for back into the home to make it where you guys can rent it out and be happy. We want to provide a product that you're happy about so that you take care of it yourself.
Absolutely. And they're walking into something that I think that's important too, is them feeling like they're kind of walking into something that feels new. And it is, because it's newer flooring, newer, countertops in the kitchen, remodeled bathrooms. You know what? They're walking into something that they can kind of be proud about living in, because it's almost all brand new and they don't have to necessarily worry about up front, like a floorboard popping up and a ton of flooring coming up or this, that, and the other. You know what I mean? They're walking into something that is newer and it is ready to go for them to live in, right?
Yeah, and our expectation is always that, like, look, we understand repairs come up. Like, when you own a home, that's just how it works. And we ask them to talk to our property manager. But what we don't ever expect, and we actually actively condone, is them reaching out to us directly on Facebook or trying to find our phone numbers.
Yeah.
Like, we pay a service to have somebody manage this for you.
Yep.
If you feel like they're not doing a great job, squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah.
You reach out to them. I promise you they're going to get to us if we start getting a lot of reports.
Yeah, 100%.
The other part too is like, don't reach out about stuff that's like not a problem. Like, if your house, has a slow drain and you just moved in, like, let us know. And then we might suggest that you pour a little Drano down there, because that's going to save you a lot. I was just listening to a podcast that they suggested that on their 6,000 units they own, they make the tenant pay the first $100 of every repair. It's in their contract. And they do a slightly lower rent, but guess what? It saves them so much in repairs. Those tenants that are, calling us about the most random stuff, like, hey, my light bulb's out. Well, did you try turning the light bulb a little bit? Like,
or run down to Home Depot or Lowe's in Indiana, where a light bulb, anywhere a light bulb's going to be dirt cheap, right? Like,
and we're not saying that we're trying to renege on our part of the contract. We do get those repairs done, but like, I'm sorry if you didn't have the if it wasn't urgent enough for you to go look at that, give us a week to figure this out. Like, don't expect you to send out a request and it be done tomorrow morning. Like, that's just not how it works when we're on the other side of the country and you're letting us know, at like 8 p.m. and you're expecting it done by tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
The other thing that we've had a lot of people ask us about is like how like we've funded our repairs, and it's been a learning experience for us. Like, that first 20,000 we actually used our own money, and that was tough. We had over borrowed on our purchase, and we had that money sitting away to like actually renovate some of the homes, and instead we ended up using that money just to fix problems that we weren't expecting.
Yeah. And so let's talk about kind of the overarching, at least options for us, right? When funding unexpected repairs and maintenance. So our business, Early Birds Investments LLC, has its own bank account, right? So we have the option to fund repairs and invoices out of our joint bank account. Each of us also have our own personal bank accounts, and then also our own personal business accounts for our own individual businesses, right?
Yeah.
So up until this point, like you were saying, I think year to date, each of us have put into the business to fund these rehabs and fund these unexpected maintenance and repairs about $17,500 a piece.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned something interesting too, which was over borrowing. So for people who don't know what over borrowing is, let's give them kind of the rundown real quick of what that means.
So when you go to a private lender to borrow money, you set out all the terms and everything, right? So you have to find a private lender who trusts you, knows that you know what you're doing, things of that sort. So when you have that relationship, then you can set very upfront terms, black and white, schedule a mortgage, and you're done. So what we did when we bought our first 4 properties, we borrowed the exact amount. That was great, but then right away we realized like we're bringing in a lot of our own money to fix these things up, and we can't afford to do 8 properties at once. So the second set of properties that we purchased, we borrowed 30,000 or 20 something thousand on top of our purchase prices. It was essentially going to be like a float. What that meant is that each property now did have debt equivalent to more money, but that money was actually in our bank account being able to be used.
Yeah.
So we used some of that. So we're probably 50,000 in at this point in maintenance and repairs. We've got 3 or 4 properties done now. And we also have 4 more to go. The other part is that when you overborrow, that money isn't necessarily tied up right away. So sometimes we might even try to use it as like owner's reserves in case something goes wrong, or we use it to pay for our interest, our debt service, which means that our cash flow doesn't have to pay for that.
Yeah. And so let's talk about how kind of our thinking is, or how our decision making is when we have a rehab that pops up, or when we have a more expensive, unexpected maintenance or repairs. So we talked about the original 20,000 invoice. Both of us forked over 10,000 of our own money because at that point our business was brand new. We weren't making cash flow. We didn't have anything built up. So we're like, this needs to get paid. We're going to need to pay it. So we each put in our own money to pay off that invoice. But let's talk about another example of our most recent bigger invoice, which is a rehab for one of our properties for 17,000.
It's different. Because first off, let's put out that this is not an unexpected rehab. It was an unexpected repair the day that we found out the tenant stopped paying. We have to evict them. But we've had some time to plan this, and
of course,
and so we were able to run our numbers. So instead of it being like, "Hey, the work's done, pay it," it's like, "How are we going to pay it?"
Yes,
still unexpected because we were planning on obviously trying to keep our tenants as long as possible
and paying as long as possible.
In this case, we had to do an eviction.
Yeah.
So you want to explain like how we ran the numbers for all that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So at this point, year to date, we had each put in 17,500 into funding this stuff. And I know both of us sat down. Both of us are at a little different positions with our individual business and cash heavy wise, right? So the conversation was, do we each want to dump in another, at $8,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is of our own money to fund this repair? Or is another option borrowing the money to cover the rehab, and we know we're going to refinance the property anyway, because that's our strategy for these things, which is the Burr method, which we covered in our season finale of season 3. And us going, okay, is there a way we can leverage using OPM, other people's money? Because the goal, right, is to use the lowest amount of our own money as possible. Is there a way to use somebody else's money to pay for this rehab, and then when we go to refinance, for them to get paid off, for everybody to get paid off, and for us to have as little money in the deal as possible?
Right.
So I think when we ran the numbers, it made a lot more sense just to use somebody else's money and put them in second position and put them, as the backup on the mortgage for the property.
Yeah.
Right. So moving forward with that, when we ran our numbers going to refinance, we thought it around $4,000 we might be in after the refinance.
I think we have to bring in like 3,500 total.
3,500 total
versus $20,000. And the difference was that we paid monthly a little bit more on our interest.
Yes.
But we overborrowed in this case again. It was 17, we borrowed 20. Some of that goes towards paying off that debt service. Help pay for some of the plumbing errors on another property. But the big thing was like, we also had another investor who's been wanting to put some money into it. He got to buy in, and he's getting interest, and he was comfortable with the risk that he was taking. He knew who the first lender was. He understood that Cade and I are both reputable people. Like, there is never a day where we will not make a debt clean. Even if this property were to burn down, we will find a way to pay him out and make sure he is made whole, including his interest. But we set everything up. So we're in the process of getting the mortgage established and recorded. But at this point, that property made way more sense to not have to use our own money on.
Yeah.
And it allowed us to keep some cash on hand. That way we don't have to bring more money in personally. Our business has some cash.
Yeah, 100%, which is not only good for us individually, right, with being a little more cash heavy to invest in, our own marketing or run that just the operating costs of our own individual business.
Right.
But like you were saying, the big part is just having more cash in the joint bank account while we're still, I mean, like you were saying, we're however long into this, what's a little over a year, 14 or 15 months. Like, that's not a long time to be building up cash reserves and cash flow while we've been rehabbing 4 or 5 properties and going through 2 evictions, right?
Yeah.
So it's good to have that account a little bit buffed up and funded while all this stuff is getting
And we've
done.
experienced the cash flow now. We've had months where we've had, money coming in, and that's been nice. And it allowed us, what was great was we automatically went to an owner's reserves account. Like, none of that money stayed in an operating account. And we just continued to work off being broke. In the sense that we weren't making unnecessary decisions or repairs or maintenance or marketing or whatever. We were just focusing on filling owner's reserves for if another big problem came up.
Yeah. So,
I mean, other than that, it ends up being, coming down to understanding who your partner is. If you have a partner, your own mindset and controlling your own emotions when that panic hits. And then being financially, fiscally prepared, responsible enough to understand that when the money comes in, you save that, because there's going to be a rainy day. And until you have, a healthy savings that's prepared for issues like that, that's when you start pulling money.
And one quick thing too, which relates to that, which I think we talked about early in season 3, is in order to minimize the number of unexpected maintenance and repairs that pops up when you're in escrow and doing your due diligence on a property, is to do your inspections. Because if you may be overpaying for a property up front, and then you decide not to do an inspection, and then X, Y, and Z is wrong with the property that could have been popped up if you did an inspection, you know what I mean? And negotiated the price lower, which is what we did on our first 4-pack after doing our inspections, was, oh shoot, X, Y, and Z can go wrong, or X, Y, and Z is already not in good shape and will need X amount to fix. So let's negotiate the price down, because that's not going to be good going down the road if it remains like that. Right.
That's 100% it. And the other part is, if you're buying it off market and if you're buying it at a steep discount, you just got to make sure you negotiate a deep enough discount that you can afford those repairs. Because otherwise you're going to get caught, and it's going to be really, really uncomfortable for an extended period of time. We have finally become comfortable with the uncomfortableness, but we're not in a spot where we can either, sit back and just say, oh, we've got these really awesome cash flowing properties and we don't have to worry about it. Like, we still have to keep our eyes on it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode of the Pursuit of Property podcast, talking about unexpected maintenance and repairs. Also talking a little bit about how we fund rehabs and fund this unexpected stuff that pops up. We know we wrapped up season 3. It's been a little bit since we've pushed out this episode, but we're looking to ramp up our content and kind of do more of these conversational style one-off topics that you guys want to hear more about. So please feel free, reach out to either one of us on social media, shoot us an email at pursuitofproperty@gmail.com if there's more stuff you want to hear about. We're here for you guys. So thanks for tuning in.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for tuning in.